mine. You found someone new, but I can't change my love the way that you do.
This is the story of a lost neighborhood and of its people who did not want to go.
I don't want no money. I want my home. The old man is old. See how the old man is old? No more. That's enough. I don't want to get out. I said to my two daughters, they don't want to get out too, because they spend a lot of money. Plenty of money they spend in this place. We not get none to nobody. Never.
Hi, welcome to the West End Video Newsletter. Tonight, because in Boston there's been some controversy with the BRA, there are a lot of redevelopment districts that are expiring, and the BRA wants to extend their use of them, like the old West End district, and there's a whole bunch of them. They have them all over the city, and they have a time limit on them, these redevelopment districts, and they're coming up and they're expiring, and the BRA wants to extend them. So there was city council had a debate about a week and a half ago, and they were going on and on and on about you know, why they should. The BRA was going on and on about why they should be extended. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the city council stepped in and they're debating it, and it looks like they may even stop it. I mean, they're at the point where they're saying that they want to know really good reasons why the city should, why the BRA should extend these districts. They should let them expire and go on. But that's, of course, on the other hand, there are things, the projects that are going on right now, like Kensington Place. The other day in the Herald, there was an article that, you know, an editorial that said that, yeah, the BRA was really bad in the old days. You know, they did projects like the West End, which, you know, they destroyed a neighborhood and blah, 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 blah. But, and they said that doesn't happen anymore. Things don't happen like that anymore. The BRA is a good outfit and they do good development. Unfortunately, I think the BRA has become the developer's arm rather than a city agency. Has become a developer's agency. Developers seem to get the best of it whenever the BRA gets involved in it. Kensington Place, which is in downtown Boston, it's the old Gaiety, which is another shame. They're tearing down this old theater that used to be a vaudeville theater and everything, and the preservationists are out fighting for it. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're going to save it. What the city is doing is they're not only letting them take, giving them the Gaiety Theater and the building that it's in, which was originally earmarked to be a new school for Chinatown, but the city instead took it away from the city and gave it to a developer. Not only did they give what should have been a school for the Chinatown neighborhood to a developer, they also gave him the streets and put the streets around the building into the same package, and they're taking, I forgot, there were a couple, well, they're strip joints, but I think they still have the rights to own their property and do whatever they want to do with it. They're taking them and putting them into the same package and making one big development package for the developer. Now, there's some talk that the developer may not even build this package. He may just take it and sell it at a profit to somewhere else, which means he's going to be totally ahead of the game. Shirley Kressel has been fighting this for a long time. We've had Shirley on this show before, and Shirley has said in the past that, you know, and she's fought the BRA tooth and nail. And people don't realize how it's such a insidious thing that they're doing, that they can take your house and then tear it down and do whatever they want with it, and you really have no say in what they do. I mean, it's not just happening here in Boston. It's happening all over the country. The Institute for Justice, which is out of Washington, has been fighting and winning some of the battles, but they've also lost a few. but they're a good outfit, and they've been fighting eminent domain and urban renewal like crazy. And in most of the cases nowadays, a lot of these places aren't even using. See, what they have to do is condemn your properties. It's a condemnation, they call it. And even if your house is really nice, but if it's in the middle of what they call a condemnation area, they can still take your property. Even though your house is beautiful, it's fine, and everything's all right with it. It's insidious. I don't think anybody should have the right to take your property unless, see, in the old days, the only way they could take your property was for public use. Then it came down to public purpose, which loosened it up. Now it's public benefit, and public benefit means that, you know, if some developer is going to put better use to your land, and you're going to use it for a higher purpose for say he's going to put up a Walmart, and the taxes will raise instead of having your house and the amount of money that you'll pay. It's just crazy, okay? It shouldn't have happened in the 50s. It shouldn't happen now. It shouldn't happen ever. You own property, you should own property. I mean, nobody should take your property just to give it to somebody else. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal recently, too, 3 days ago, that stated the same thing. I mean, just about everybody says that, you know, eminent domain urban renewal is not a great thing. Only use it, so you should only use it when you absolutely have to. But in this day and age, it's become a tool for developers. And with this tool, they're creating all kinds of problems. And I still don't understand how the Herald could say that they're a fine organization now. They've worked everything out and they're doing good for the people, because it's just not happening. It just irritates me something terrible, because all these years that I've watched what happened in the West End, and I've been a follower of the BRA. I watch what's happening, and they're not any better. They haven't changed. They still do hideous things. I mean, there are some good people there, but the actual idea of the BRA and what they do just isn't right. It's un-American, actually, I would think. I don't think that you know, anybody should have the right to take your property. The show tonight we have is it's a ABC documentary that was done in 1962. It's called Lost Neighborhood, and we're going to show that to you. We show it like every year and a half, every 2 years, because we think people should realize what urban renewal and eminent domain is all about. When you see this, I use it as I give a talk every year to urban planning students and masters in urban planning students, and what happens is people can't believe the things that some of the people in this documentary is saying. So be that as it may, we're going to show you Lost Neighborhood.
By an emissary of the city, the state, or the federal government. They just don't like to be told. They regard it as something out of a page of Adolf Hitler, that a person representing our government on any level can walk right in, and simply because they say that the home or the property is blighted, move them out and tear the property down. Urban renewal becomes a very, very emotional subject to many people.
I lived in the West End, the same apartment which I loved, had a marvelous landlord, some of the most wonderful neighbors on earth. And I liked the West End. We lived there, as I said, for 20 years. We had to move. And actually, in the 3.5 years that I've been living outside the West End, I still have a feeling that I'm boarding out, that I'm waiting to go back home.
To Wanda Zakovich, a home is more than just a living place. 12,000 of her former neighbors feel the same, and millions of Americans are learning the same feelings. For in these 1960s, we're dedicated to renewing our cities, tearing down the old to replace it with the modern. Many times, it is a case of the common good versus the desires of the individual. But once torn, the old neighborhood can never be replaced. That is the subject of this program. The Lost Neighborhood. The city of Boston is proud of its landmarks. Boston shows devout reverence for historic shrines. Once there was a neighborhood in the shadows of Faneuil Hall. It was called the West End. Admittedly, it was not a place of beauty, but it was the chosen home of 12,000 Bostonians who within it found love and warmth, shelter and contentment. And what else is home? But it is today's thinking that the old and decaying parts of a city, and Boston has some, must be replaced. You must keep pace with the glitter of new cities. The process by which this is done is called urban renewal. Now, urban renewal is a city planner's phrase. Reduced to its simplest terms, it has most often meant knocking down the old and erecting the modern and imposing, which will attract new businesses, new money, and new people. This happened to the West End. The old has been knocked down. The West Enders are gone. Luxury apartments for 450 families now stand where once there were row upon row of well-worn, well-filled brick houses for 12,000. Other buildings are slow in rising. Even the name has changed. They no longer call it West End. Now it is Charles River Park.
That for many of the families there, to live in the West End meant a privilege rather than a bad necessity. They had a beautiful recreation area right next door along the Charles River. They had a way of life in their streets, of a lot of communication from family to family, across the street, from window to window. A great many ways had been developed of companionship and mutual help in an informal way within large families and from family to family, which allowed them to put up with the bad housing with just the same, a sense of relative comfort. And many of the homes, looking perhaps ugly from the outside, were well appointed inside and had many attractive features arranged by the families in their efforts to create a comfortable life.
Outsiders always find it easier to make realistic appraisals on human problems. Losing one's home is a human problem. And when you talk to the West Enders, you hear the talk of the heart rather than realistic appraisals, which is only to be expected, for even in the 20th century, human beings are largely governed by their hearts. This is Wanda Zakovich.
Telling about the uprooting of the 12,000 men, women, and children in the West End isn't an easy thing to do in just a matter of minutes, because there's just too much agony, too much heartbreak and chaos.
If you want to see what it is the West End used to be, then you have to go to other neighborhoods in Boston, neighborhoods still standing.
I would call the West End a typical American community. The American neighborhood as we knew it in former times, before the era of urban renewal. We were a mixture of many, many nationalities, many races, colors of skin. We were teachers and artists. We were waitresses and plumbers. We were retired bankers, all sorts of people. And you had your little grocery stores, a person that could go in and talk to her grocer, her meat market man. She could speak to him in Russian, in Jewish, and Polish, and French. She could buy her own special kind of bread, her own cheeses, the different brands of coffee and the grind that she liked. It was just a mixture of everything and anything, and yet the most fantastic thing was we all got along and loved each other. We really did. There were never any neighborhood squabbles. You could walk through the streets at 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning. You never had to look over your shoulder. If you met anybody walking along, it was the same familiar face that you saw year after year. In fact, America was everything that the world is crying for today when they speak about the brotherhood of man, of loving our neighbor and getting along. And yet, when they had this in the West End, they destroyed it. An area is taken as the West End was because it was by the riverside and where people were paying anywhere from, say, $20 to $150 a month rent. They could now get anywhere from $135 to $600 a month rent. It was just the money alone. And when the West End was cleared against the people's wishes, this was what was built, luxury-type apartments. We weren't immune. But when you saw the older people, especially the ones who came from Europe and took the voice of authority without any question, but who knew that there was something wrong, you didn't know what to say to them when they met you on the street and they cried. And they'd stand there, an old man and an old woman with their arms around each other. This is where they had lived for 40, 50, 60 years. The only home they knew. And everybody was going. And most of them really had no place to go. Then, too, we have a lot of the elderly folks who live alone. I know of women who lived in the Charles Bank homes. And a lot of them had lived there 20, 30, 40-odd years. But they knew each other, and their neighbors knew them, and they knew enough to drop in on them during the day, ring their bell, see if they were fine, or they'd see them out in the street and knew that they were well.
Oh, the West End used to look nice, though. It was home-like. It was very nice, I thought. I learned to like the people in the West End, and they were all nice to me. And since I've been up here, they go by and talk with me. Well, not so much now as they was before they began to tear down that part of it, see? But they combine, there isn't one of them that doesn't talk to me as they pass by here.
Then the woman who lived next door to me, who was moved to a housing project in Charlestown, I came downstairs one morning. She was standing in my doorway. This was on the other side of the West End. And she said, hi. She said, you don't mind if I stand here? And I said, well, no, why should I? And she said, I'm watching them take my house down. And I was really appalled because that was something that even I didn't have the courage to do. I couldn't watch them tear down the house I lived in. Yet this woman came back for 3 days in a row until the house was torn down. Never saw her again. I know for a fact that people do come back to the West End. You meet them in the grocery store. That's the funniest thing. Some people were born in the area. Some had moved in as youngsters with their family, and very few people moved out of the area. It was a wonderful place to bring up children, for instance. We had the Charles River boating program. We had swimming pools. We had the little baseball leagues that the young fellows played in, and at night their fathers had their softball teams down there that they went down to after dinner. And then, too, it had the old European idea of a child was brought up with a bit of discipline. He was taught to love his God and his country. He was taught that things were wrong or right. And the child wasn't confused, I think, under those ideas.
The case for replacing the West End with these apartment buildings is made by the chairman of the Boston Redevelopment Authority, the Right Reverend Monsignor Francis J. Lally.
For many years, Boston has been a place where people looked over their shoulder at the past rather than on their tiptoes looking into the future. As a result, the old has been preferred, and new investments, new ideas, new money has passed Boston by and has settled in other parts of the country. One of Boston's first renewal projects was the so-called Charles River Park, which replaced the ancient and very much honored West End of Boston. This was a part of our city which had many picturesque qualities, but on analysis and statistical survey, proved to be a thoroughly blighted area. It was what we'd have to call, in the language of planners, a city slum.
The word slum is a loaded word. It tells you how the user of the word feels. It doesn't tell you anything about the thing which he is talking about. So that if I use the word slum with reference to a particular section of a city, this simply says in some way that I disapprove of, that I don't like, that I devalue that area. When the redevelopment authority, the newspapers, the rest of society says to them, you are living in a slum. This is a blighted area. This is something which can be destroyed and which is expendable. It hits the person in the very core of his being, because this means I am no good. I am expendable. I can be shoved around by society.
We don't care. Let them say what they want. We were happy here. People kept coming in, like I said, from different states and said to us, well, how could you live here? You know, this is slums. These are our homes and we're happy here.
The question is, whose happiness is most important? The rest of Boston, who will glow with civic pride in the shiny and renewed area, or the affected men and women who have been uprooted? If the fate of the West End was for the greater common good, the sacrifice was not accepted by its dispossessed. Resentful or not, they had to move.
Right over.
My hopes for the future are that I'll meet some people that like West Enders. I doubt if we'll ever have another West End like we've had. I hope my children will be adjusted. I hope my mother will be happy. I just hope that we'll all lead a more contented life now that this is finally over with, now that we have to move and we know we have to go. And I just hope that we'll find peace. That's all.
Understandably, there have been political repercussions to the urban renewal projects. The politicians are acutely sensitive to it and to its impact on their constituents. They see it as a mixed blessing, fine for the city, a trial to their constituents. Councilman Peter Hines takes his stand.
I think most people misunderstand completely the problems of politicians like myself in dealing with this urban renewal program. We are not against it. This city council, quite to the contrary, has devoted extraordinary effort in trying to get the urban renewal authority to do more. Our major quarrel with the program is that it's not moving fast enough. But no matter how fast or how slowly the program moves, you cannot escape, you will never escape, the human problems involved. The great error, the great mistake, was that at the time that the West End development was going up, there was not also going up in other areas of the city low 2- and 3-family, low rent duplex houses, 2- or 3-family houses, or garden-type apartments that could reasonably accommodate the people dislocated at rents that they could afford. There was nothing else wrong, in my opinion, with the West End development, other than, I would add this one point. In this whole picture of urban renewal, you can't forget people.
It is not likely the people will permit themselves to be forgotten. Alston, another area of Boston, is somewhat removed from the West End, but it too figures in the urban renewal scheme. And like their fellow Bostonians who dwelt in the West End, the Alstonians are not happy. Moreover, they're angry and articulate. Their voices have been and will continue to be heard.
We have been bothered here now for the last 2 years by these people from the BRA. They've come through here and practically forced their way into our homes to measure them and to set them up so they can take them. And nobody around here wants their urban renewal, nor do we want their relocation. If they want to get us out of here, they're going to come in and take us dragging, kicking and screaming out of the house and throw our furniture after us because we're not going. I don't want no money. I want my home. The old man is old. See how the old man is old? No more. That's enough. I don't want to get out. I sent my 2 daughters. They don't want to get out too because they spend a lot of money. Plenty of money they spend in this place. You're not getting out for nobody. Never.
Some people are going to be hurt, and their rights, in my opinion, will not be entirely respected. But when you're moving thousands of people around, you were really doing it for the good of the whole, and the people of Boston will benefit enormously from this.
We come to the end of the West End and its story. There will be those who remember, those who lived there, those who saw it torn down, perhaps even those who tore it down. For the rest, it is gone. If urban renewal is the burning issue of the 60s, then for all cities there remains the question, is it possible for the needs of a modern city to be dovetailed with the desires of the individual to no one's hurt? It is an old question, one of the oldest. It merely reoccurs in a new setting. For cities are collections of buildings, and buildings are a cluster of homes, and homes are where people feel safe, warm, and protected. On sunny days, Marino still takes out his hurdy-gurdy, but there are fewer and fewer places for him to go.
That was Lost Neighborhood, and I hope you enjoyed it, and we show it every so often just to show you what the effects of eminent domain and urban renewal and the BRA can be. Like I said before, in Chinatown, that was originally, the city owns this property, and originally it was going to become a school for Chinatown. And the BRA took it from the city by eminent domain. How they did that, I have no clue, because it's one city agency taking from another city agency. And the people of Chinatown lost when that happened, because, you know, that was something that they should have had, okay, because it was in the works for them. And not only that, I mean, they got this big development on the edge of Chinatown that's not even, you know, it's probably going to help destroy their neighborhood because, you know, usually when you bring in those big projects, traffic and noise mitigation and all the rest of that stuff comes into it. I mean, Chinatown is going to suffer from Kensington Place, unfortunately. And the way it goes now, it looks like nobody cares about, the politicians don't seem to care about whether it goes through or not. Like I say, the city council try to stop the BRA from extending their expiring use on the redevelopment districts, but in this case, in Kensington Place, it looks like they're not doing a hell of a lot. And I know Shirley Kressel, like I mentioned before, she's been out there leading the fight, and I hope the hell she wins because she's a great, she's really moving, and the people of Chinatown deserve a win too. Unfortunately, that may not happen. See you at the next West End Video Newsletter. Power to the people.